This video is sponsored by Supremacy Call of War 1942, the free online PvP strategy game where you take control of a real country to lead during World War II. It's the darkest hours of human history, and it's up to you to build up a powerful army to defend your country. You'll be up against 99 other players in matches that unfold in real time, over days or even weeks, in a true test of long-term strategy, patience, and tactical brilliance. What I really love, though, is just how many ways there are to play. Want to go full-tank blitzkrieg? Prefer air dominance with fighter jets or bombers? Maybe you're like me and you invest in top-secret technologies like nuclear weapons or stealthy marines. The new amphibious unit with unique abilities and terrain bonuses. In Supremacy Call of War 1942, it's your call as you shape history or rewrite it entirely. But best of all, it's free to play and fully cross-platform on PC and mobile, so you never lose track of your campaign no matter where you are. For the next 30 days only, Supremacy Call of War 1942 is offering Infographics Show viewers a starter pack worth $25, which includes loot boxes that can drop the powerful new Marine unit. So click the special link in the description, choose a country, and start fighting in the ultimate confrontation right now. The sky tore open. Hundreds of fighter planes descended from the clouds. Below them, the pride of the Pacific Fleet, Pearl Harbor. The lead pilot checked his altitude, 14,000 feet. Perfect. The Americans had no idea what was about to happen. He felt a cold clam wash over him. He signaled his squadron. The training took over. No fear, no hesitation, only the target. He pushed the stick forward and the engine screamed. The hunt was on. 6:15 a.m., December 7th, 1941. Far below the clouds, Petty Officer Hiroshi Tanaka stood on the flight deck of the Akagi. His hands hurt, raw and red from spending the morning securing planes, pulling chocks, and checking fuel lines. He had waved as the last Zero fighter took off, knowing that the fate of his nation was about to change forever. And now there was silence. Tanaka paced back and forth, unable to stand still. Admiral Nagumo, the commander of the fleet, had given the orders. Launch at dawn with no hesitation. Tanaka knew the stakes, and so did everyone else on the ship. If the Americans found them now, they were gone. The Akagi had no planes left to defend itself. If an American submarine surfaced, it would put a torpedo right into their side. If an American scout plane saw them, bombers would be on the way. They were a sitting target in the middle of the ocean. The waiting was the hardest part. 7 a.m. Deep below the Pacific, Ensign Kazuo Sakamaki was cramped inside a metal tube, the HA-19, a Midget submarine. It was dark, hot, and it smelled like a mix of sweat and battery acid, with just enough room for him and one crewman. They were lurking right outside of the enemy harbor. Their mission was secret and dangerous. They had launched from a mother submarine hours ago with simple orders: sneak into the harbor, wait for the airstrike to start, and then torpedo any ship that tries to escape. It sounded easy on paper, but in reality it was a nightmare. He tapped the glass on his compass, and the needle started to spin. Sakamaki felt a surge of panic. Without a compass, he was blind. He had no way to see where he was going. He could use a periscope, but that meant the Americans might spot him. There was no other option. Slowly, he pushed the periscope up and looked through the eyepiece, but the lens was foggy. He couldn't see anything. Everything was going wrong. The gyro compass was dead, the periscope was useless, and the submarine was drifting. Sakamaki felt the weight of a nation on him. He had written a letter to his family and left a lock of his hair behind. He was supposed to fall today, gloriously as a hero. The Navy called them Special Attack Units, which was a nice way of saying one-way squad. He accepted that. He wanted to give everything for the Emperor, but to fail because of a broken compass, that was not glorious, that was shameful. Suddenly, a loud metal bang rang through the hull. The submarine shuddered. They had hit a reef, and the submarine was stuck. Sakamaki gave the order for full reverse. The electric engine whined and screeched. The smell of burning rubber filled the air as white smoke started to leak from the batteries. The air grew thick, making it hard to breathe. Sakamaki coughed as his eyes watered. He wasn't fighting the Americans yet. He was fighting his own ship. 7:49 a.m. The clouds broke and Lieutenant Commander Fuchida blinked against the bright morning sun. Below him, the island of Oahu appeared. It was green, lush, and beautiful, like a paradise, and it was asleep. Fuchida scanned the ground for fighter planes, but the sky was empty and the ground was quiet. The Americans had no idea. He looked across the harbor. There they were, the battleships. They were lined up in a neat row 2 by 2. The Arizona, the Oklahoma, the West Virginia, the pride of the American Navy. Fuchida felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment that history would change. He grabbed his radio and he pressed the button. Tora, Tora, Tora. It was the code that meant surprise had been achieved. His voice was steady, but inside his stomach was in knots. He was happy, terrified, and excited all at once. He fired a single blue flare from his pistol to signal the attack. Behind him, the formation broke apart. The bombers dived, the torpedo planes dropped low, and the fighters climbed high. The swarm was attacking. 7:55 a.m. Lieutenant Shibata watched the signal flare. "Attack!" he yelled to himself. Flying an Aichi D-3A dive bomber, the 26-year-old squadron leader adjusted his gloves and checked the gauges. Behind him, 9 other planes followed closely, maybe 3 feet apart, flying like a single machine. Shibata looked down. The ships were getting bigger, closer. He picked his target, a large battleship. He didn't know the name yet, he just knew it was the enemy. He pushed the stick forward and the plane tipped over, nose pointing straight down at the water. Gravity took hold of him, pulling him back into his seat as the G-forces crushed down. The engine screamed as the plane picked up speed. The wind roared outside as the altimeter spun like crazy. 14,000 feet, 6,000 feet, 3,000 feet. The ship rushed up to meet him. He could see the decks, the guns, and the people beginning to panic. But it was too late. Shibata narrowed his eyes and lined up the sight. He had to be perfect. The bomb weighed nearly 1,800 pounds, and he had to drop it exactly at 2,500 feet. Not higher, not lower, and if he missed, he failed his country. 2,500 feet. He pulled the lever, and the plane jumped as the weight of the bomb fell away. Now came the hard part, pulling up. He yanked the stick back with both his hands, straining with the effort. The plane groaned, wings bent, and the G-forces crushed him until everything went gray for a second. He bottomed out just 50 feet above the water. He fought with the controls, desperately willing the plane to rise. Suddenly, a massive explosion tore through the air. A shockwave hit him, and the plane shuddered. The wings dipped. He wrestled with it, begging to stay in the air. Shibata risked a glance behind him. A cloud of black smoke rose from the ship. Fire licked the deck. A direct hit. Shibata felt a surge of joy. He had done it. He had struck a blow for the Empire. But then chaos erupted. Black puffs of smoke appeared in the air around him, flak from anti-aircraft fire. The Americans were firing back. To his left, he saw a plane from a squadron trailing smoke. It rolled over and smashed into the water, cartwheeling across the waves. Shibata's heart skipped a beat. The sky was filled with tracers and explosions. Ships were burning, but his friends were dying. It was a storm of fire and blood. 8 a.m. Navigator Takeshi Maeda held his breath as the Nakajima B-5N torpedo bomber swooped down, skimming just above the waves. The pilot banked sharply, the wingtip almost touching the water. They had to be at 30 feet. If they were too high, the torpedo would break apart when it hit the water. Too low, and they would crash. They were flying toward the USS West Virginia, a giant wall of gray steel up ahead. Maeda thought about his father, who had pushed him into the Navy. Maeda had wanted to be an artist, but the Empire didn't need artists, it needed warriors. So he became a navigator, learning to drop torpedoes in shallow water. They had practiced for 6 months in a special bay in Japan that looked a lot like Pearl Harbor, modifying the torpedoes with wooden fins so they wouldn't sink into the mud. They were flying straight at the ship, making them an easy target. Maeda saw flashes on the ship's deck, machine guns. Bullets pinged against the fuselage. Holes appeared, sunlight streaming through them. Maeda flinched, desperately trying to steel himself. 2,400 feet. This was it. The pilot pressed the release. The plane lurched as the torpedo splashed into the water. Maeda watched it and prayed. The torpedo left a white wake behind it, running straight and true, heading right for the side of the West Virginia. The sudden thunderous crash shook the world. A massive column of water shot up into the air. Oil and water erupted. Steel groaned and buckled as the ship shuddered and started to list to the side. But the celebrations were cut short. Maeda looked to his right and saw another torpedo bomber on fire. The wing broke off, and it tumbled into the sea, exploding on impact. Another failure, another soul lost. Maeda's plane was shaking and the engine coughed. They had taken damage. The pilot fought with the stick. The plane turned away from the harbor, facing a 300-mile flight back to the carrier over the open ocean with a damaged engine and no radio. Maeda looked at his map and grabbed his pencil. He had to navigate by dead reckoning, guessing the wind and the speed. If he calculated wrong, they would run out of gas and be lost in the Pacific. The triumph of the hit faded, replaced by the fear of the return trip. 8:15 a.m. Lieutenant Commander Fuchida circled high above. He looked down at the burning harbor, seeing smoke, explosions, and torpedo bombers doing their work. But up here, nothing. He was waiting for the American fighters, but they were all destroyed on the ground. Harada was one of the elite, selected from 1,500 trainees where only 26 made it. He was a master of the sky, and he wanted to fight to test his skill. His wife was pregnant back home. He had said his goodbye to her with a stoic face because tears were for the weak. telling her that he would return with honor. He rationalized the attack. The Americans were arrogant. They thought the Japanese couldn't fly, that they were inferior. He saw a bomber in trouble below, chased by anti-aircraft fire. Fuchida dived, screaming down from the sky as the wind roared. He lined up his sights on the anti-aircraft guns and pressed the trigger. His cannons roared, tracers chewing up the ground until he saw a gun pit explode. He pulled up sharply, the G-forces slamming him into his seat. It felt good and powerful. But then he looked at the harbor again, scanning the rows of ships. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers. Something was missing. Where were the aircraft carriers? The Enterprise and the Lexington weren't there. The berths were empty. Harada felt a cold knot in his stomach. The carriers were the real threat. The battleships were dinosaurs, but the carriers were the future, and they were gone. They had escaped. The battleships were burning. The Arizona was gone, reduced to a massive fireball that lit up the sky. It was glorious destruction, but without the carriers, the victory was incomplete. Fuchida circled again. The smoke was getting thicker and harder to see through. The Americans were waking up now, and the sky was filled with black puffs of destruction. He had to dodge and weave. The easy part was over. Now it was a mess. 8:30 a.m. Sakamaki was coughing violently. The inside of the Midget sub had become a gas chamber. The batteries were ruined, and the chlorine gas was filling the air, burning his throat and his eyes. They had failed completely. The sub had hit a reef 3 times, and the torpedoes wouldn't fire because the mechanism was jammed. There was only one thing for it: destroy the sub so the enemy can't capture it. Sakamaki crawled onto the back, set the fuse on the explosive charge, and lit it. Sakamaki and his crewmen scrambled up the ladder and opened the hatch to the fresh air and the water. They leaped into the ocean, where the huge waves pounded against the reef. Sakamaki swam, waiting for the explosion. He waited and he waited, but nothing happened. The charge was a dud. It had simply fizzled out. The sub was drifting to the beach. It was going to be captured intact. The secret weapon, a trophy for the Americans. Sakamaki took a look around. The crewman was gone, taken by the waves. Sakamaki was alone and exhausted. His body gave up, and the tide threw him onto the sand. He lay there gasping, unable to move, until he heard English voices. An American soldier stood over him with a gun. Sakamaki closed his eyes, wishing he had a pistol to finish it. He was the first prisoner of war. The disgrace was total. While the pilots above were heroes destroying the fleet, he was a failure. He was alive, and that was the worst sin of all. The glory of the mission meant nothing now. There was only burning hot shame. 9 a.m. Lieutenant Commander Fuchida was still circling. As the commander, he had to stay until the end to see the damage. The harbor had become a sea of fire. The Arizona had broken in half and was sinking. The Oklahoma was flipped over, its bottom sticking out of the water like a dead whale. The West Virginia was sitting on the mud, oil burning on the water, sending a thick black smoke miles into the sky. Fuchida grabbed his camera and took pictures, proof for the Emperor. The first wave had been perfect, but the second wave was having a harder time. The Americans were awake now, and every gun on every ship was firing. Fuchida saw Japanese planes plummeting from the sky. They had lost maybe 20 or 30 planes, but it was a light price to pay for destroying the U.S. Pacific Fleet. But the nagging thought remained. The carriers. He picked up his radio and signaled the fleet. Attack completed, returning to base. He banked his plane north, feeling proud. They had done the impossible, traveling thousands of miles in secret to strike a blow that would ring through history. The resource wars would be won, and Japan could breathe again. But as he flew away from the burning island, he felt a chill. They had woken the giant and hurt him, but they hadn't destroyed him, and now the giant would be angry. 10 a.m. Petty Officer Tanaka stood at the edge of the deck scanning the sky. Dots appeared on the horizon. The planes were coming back, and Tanaka felt a rush of relief. But as they got closer, that relief turned to worry. Some of the planes were smoking, some had holes in their wings, and others were wobbling. A bomber came in for a landing, hitting the deck hard. It bounced, and the landing gear collapsed as it skidded to a halt. Tanaka ran forward to help pull the pilot out. He was bleeding, and the gunner was dead. Tanaka looked at the plane. It was riddled with bullet holes. He worked fast, refueling, rearming, and clearing the debris. He saw Lieutenant Commander Shibata climb out of his bomber. Shibata looked older, his face covered in soot and exhaustion. Shibata nodded and smiled. The battleships were gone. Cheers erupted on the deck as sailors hugged each other, but Tanaka saw the officers talking, and Admiral Nagumo looking at the maps. There was talk of a third wave. They could go back to bomb the oil tanks and repair yards. If they destroyed the oil tanks, the American fleet would be useless for months. But Nagumo shook his head. He was afraid. He didn't know where the American carriers were. If he stayed too long, the American planes might find the Japanese fleet. It was time to go home. Tanaka watched the order go out. The ships turned, and the bow of the Akagi cut through the water. He felt a mix of emotions: pride for the great victory, sadness at the empty spaces on the deck, and fear because he knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 12 p.m. Fujita sat in the briefing room, wiping the grease from his face. The pilots were buzzing with stories, hitting cruisers, seeing magazines explode, dodging thick flak. They were high on adrenaline, feeling like heroes. But Fujita sat quietly, thinking about the logic and the rationalization of it all. Japan needed resources and space. The world had tried to stop them, so they lashed out. It was simple survival, or at least that's what they told themselves. But Fujita remembered the smoke, the oil burning in the water, and the faces of the men he had sent to certain death. He wondered if the American will was broken or if it was just hardened. He looked at his hands. They were steady now that the attack was over. The Akagi steamed through the dark ocean, leaving behind a broken fleet and a burning harbor. Ahead of them lay a war that would consume the world. The operation was a tactical masterpiece, but strategically it was a gamble, and the dice had just been rolled. Thanks again to our sponsor, Supremacy Call of War 1942, the free online PvP strategy game set in World War II and played by millions worldwide. Click the link in the description to get your exclusive starter pack worth $25, including loot boxes with the new Marine unit, available for the next 30 days only. Now go check out what Japan thought would happen after Pearl Harbor, or click on this video instead.